The Justice Reform 2023 Part 2 took place at the Bridge Multicultural and Advocacy Project. It was organized by the United Politcial Association. Those who attended included T. Mitchell-Czar, working in the Mayor's Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, Stephanie Wiley, the Council Justice Program for the Brennan Center for Justice, Jumani Williams, the Public Advocate of New York City, and the CEO of the Bridge, Mr. Mark Mayor Apple.
So my name is Stephanie Wiley, and I am a counsel at the Justice Program with the Brennan Center for Justice. So the Brennan Center for Justice works on a number of different issues ranging from democracy matters to what my team does, which is criminal justice reform and reform issues. So I in particular work on bail reform and other pretrial matters. I also work on our Clean Slate Advocacy, which, Clean Slate, as I was just saying earlier, just passed in New York, which is automatic record sealing, among other issues.
Stephanie, people in third world countries like Pakistan, like even you can say India and other part of subcontinent, they believe that American justice system is a really good one. How you foresee this system as being an American?
That is a really interesting question. I was just stating earlier that, I feel that there are always improvements to be made, and that I think you asked the question, was I satisfied with it? And I think that's so hard to answer. One of the things I discussed earlier was bail reform here in New York, and so I think that we do have a problem with mass incarceration in our country. However, I see efforts being made to address it. And that includes things like bail reform, like Clean Slate, like I said, and I always think that that's something positive. So I always like to see our attempts to make our system more equitable and more fair. And so happy to see those attempts being made.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I'm here for part 2 of our Justice Reform series. Earlier this year, we came together as a community and as elected officials and people who are experts in the field of justice reform to talk about the topic. As you know, Black and brown community members are the ones who are most severely impacted by justice. They're usually justice involved, they're usually the ones that are not aware of what their rights are, so we convened a forum to make sure that we are hearing from the experts in the field, so that when we leave this space, we can go out into the community and make sure that our neighbors, our family, our friends are ready for any engagement that they have with justice, so that when it's all said and done, we are more sustainable, they are heard, and they are no longer being penalized for walking while Black.
My name is Hassan Bakruddin. I'm the president of the wonderful political club called the United Politcial Association. And we're here for our Justice Reform event, Part 2. I'm very excited, and certainly we are excited to be in this wonderful space that Mark Appel has generously put out and given us an opportunity to be able to utilize for the evening. And thank you so much, Mark, by the way, for that. But we're here just to really talk about justice reform, what it looks like in the 21st century. Certainly what has been happening now on the current landscape, but looking at also forward, what other reforms, what other innovations that are going to be needed moving forward into the 21st century, and also looking at what other states are actually doing when it comes to justice reform as well. I absolutely do think we're making progress with judicial reform. I think it's an important topic. We still have a long way to go. There are things that certainly, if we don't have the right party that's in place, sometimes things take a little longer, but I think we are absolutely heading in the right direction. We've only taken a few steps forward. I mean, we've had the Clean Slate Act, which was just recently voted upon in both houses of the Assembly and Senate in New York State, when it was signed by Governor Kathy Hochul. So we actually are moving in the right direction, but there's still so much more to do. And certainly why we have these subject matter experts and our elected officials here to have the conversation, to figure out ways in we can help to further that discussion, not just here in New York State, but also nationally, which is very key as well. Great.
Hi, I'm just so glad to be here with Hassan, runs the UNA chapter. Very important issue, judicial reform. It's something that you've been working on for a long time.
Yeah,
one of the only groups in the city that's working on it.
Yeah.
Because we got to have an equitable distribution of justice in a community. Mm-hmm. For the city to function, to heal, and to get people together, you have to have an equal system It's been a long time since the justice system has been set up in New York State and New York City and the country.
Absolutely.
But every issue that affects our community needs a fine-tuning.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for this important event tonight.
Absolutely.
We will highlight with experts on the issue of judicial reform.
Sure.
And let's hope for some good outputs.
Yeah, I think we will. I think we're just starting the conversation, as I mentioned earlier, but we are looking to take it further as we include not only our elected officials, but also, like you said, our subject matter experts, and the community needs to know as well what's happening. So absolutely, I agree. 100%.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. Oh boy, that doesn't sound very good. Good evening, Brooklyn. Good evening. All right, good. So as you can see, we need to make sure that we get started because we have a few of our guests that need to pop out and we don't want to hold them. But my name, just for those who don't know, my name is Hassan Bakardine. I'm the president of this amazing organization called the Unified Political Association. And thank you guys for being here on time. Okay, and thank our esteemed guests, panelists for being here as well. Really appreciate you guys coming out here and talking about this important topic of justice reform as well in your specific areas. So we really appreciate that. We are going to have this recorded, so that's fine, I hope. But you guys should be used to that anyway because y'all get recorded all the time. But either way, I certainly wanted to just make sure that I introduced myself. I don't want to belabor the point because I'm going to be bringing up my wonderful moderator this evening, Joan Bakardine, who's here, and also our Q&A coordinator, Ella Fredericks, who's here as well. She's going to be doing the Q&A for us. But prior to that, before I do that, I do want to bring up Mark because Mark Appel, just to say a few words, sir, about the Bridge Multicultural Advocacy Project.
Today is part 2. We brought back some of the same people and we've added some talent, some additional talent to the conversation. The topic, justice reform. So as you know, Black and brown humans are the ones that are most severely impacted by the lack of justice.
So as was said, I'm a counsel at the Brennan Center for Justice. Prior to joining the Brennan Center for Justice, I was the Associate Director for Courts and Legal Policy at the Center for American Progress. And so I'm happy to be here tonight and happy to talk about criminal justice in general, and in particular mass incarceration and pretrial policies. So I'll start off this time with some good news for what's going on in New York. So in June, the New York Senate and the Assembly passed the Clean Slate Act, which is something that we've been yes, that definitely is worth popping for. It's something we've been advocating for several years at the Brennan Center, and so it didn't pass for a few years due to some technicalities, so very excited that it's finally passed. So the Clean Slate Act will automatically seal criminal records after a waiting period, so that's 3 years for misdemeanors and 8 years for felonies, and that's only if the person doesn't commit a new offense. The legislation is currently still awaiting the governor's signature, but this is really momentous legislation, and for some of the reasons that were already discussed tonight, because having a criminal record has such wide-ranging consequences in a person's life. This includes affecting where they can live, affecting the jobs they can hold, it can affect the kind of education they're able to receive, and over 2 million New Yorkers have a criminal record, which costs some $12.6 billion in reduced earnings annually, and also affects the amount of money we have in the economy and here in New York in general. So that's the great news, and then I'll segue into my pretrial discussion. So bail is something I'm really passionate about, and pretrial policies in general, and pretrial incarceration and bail is a huge contributor to our mass incarceration epidemic. So right now, more than 400,000 people in the United States are currently being detained pretrial. That means that these are people who are incarcerated but are still legally innocent. The number of people in jail pretrial has quadrupled since the 1980s, and approximately 69% of people in city and county jails are being held pretrial. And I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. I won't go through my entire spiel, but I always like to do, and I feel like Jumani did this a little bit already, I like to do a little bit of level setting of what bail is. So historically, bail was just an amount of money paid to ensure that people would return to court. It has no bearing on whether the person is more than likely innocent or not, because in the United States you are innocent until proven guilty. So this is an amount, typically cash bail, is the amount of cash that the person has to pay just to ensure that they're going to return to court. Unfortunately, in the United States, bail is typically set at levels that are far too high for most people to pay. So leaves people with three really awful options. One, you can sit in jail until your trial, and sometimes that can take years. You can find a way to pay, such as working with a for-profit bail bonds company, which can lead to its own set of issues, which I can talk about a little bit if anyone's interested afterwards. Or they can plead guilty, give up the right to defend themselves at trial, which is what a lot of people do. So it leads to a lot of bad convictions for people who might have actually been innocent but didn't want to potentially sit in jail for years. So what cash bail is doing is really contributing to this horrible system of wealth inequality that we have in the United States. And this cash bail system is only just adding to the current disparities. So you end up with a system, which is what we have now, where wealthy people can afford their freedom, and poor people are either have to plead guilty to get their freedom, or pay an exorbitant sum, sometimes going into debt to get their freedom. And there are a lot of impacts of pretrial incarceration, and these range from, of course, isolation from your community, from your family, and there's an increased likelihood of being convicted due to plea deals, as I stated. It impacts your access to housing, it impacts people's jobs. I've had that happen to people I know who lost their jobs just because they were detained for a week. And it actually increases recidivism. It can lead to more crime as people lose their jobs and don't have any other options.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate to be acknowledged as a decent human being, as we all would like to be. It's a pleasure to be with UPA tonight. I appreciate the invitation to be a part of this part two. I do understand the need for such conversations and very important conversations around justice reform because of where we find ourselves, as you mentioned, and where we find ourselves today in our society. As mentioned, my name is A.T. Mitchell. I'm the proud founder and chief executive officer for a community-based nonprofit called Man Up Incorporated. I'm also very proud to be the appointed co-chair of the Mayor's Gun Violence Prevention Task Force here in New York City. That was established now close to a year and a half ago, last 2002, June of 2002. And ever since then, I have, as you mentioned, I've been more elevated to a place of understanding around the issue of justice reform, more than I've been when I was just executive directing my nonprofit. I've been able to see a lot more of, sort of things from a different lens. And so I appreciate the opportunity to serve my city in this capacity. As mentioned, also I have close to 30 years now of lived experiences of also being, on the ground, in the neighborhoods and in the communities throughout the city, advocating on behalf of our community and our people. I'm very proud to be a person responsible, one of those persons responsible for the type of reform work that we are undergoing as we speak today. When you speak of the work that we do as a nonprofit.
But no, I just want to recognize the space, the Bridge, and Mark Appel, because he created this space I'm sure it's talked about for unity, and I know there's a lot going on in the world right now. It's a lot of tense space, but I want to make sure to recognize a space like this was created for a time like this. So I just want to thank Mark, and I'm not going to say anything to make it too hot. I just want to make sure that we're praying for everybody and what they're dealing with in the Middle East now, Israel and Palestine. It's a lot of death. There's a lot of trauma. Let's make sure we're keeping everybody in our prayers tonight. I can't imagine being a father, figuring out how you're going to deal with everything that's going on over there. In terms of justice and we have to call it justice reform. I've tried to stay away from the word reform nowadays. I feel like I don't think we're necessarily trying to reform something. I think we're trying to change a whole system and put a whole new system in. Because I keep saying, I think it's operating pretty much how it was designed to operate. And so I always say, if the quote unquote forefathers woke up and they would say, I don't know why you had a black president or why women are voting, but otherwise you did a pretty good job of moving forward what we put in place. And I feel like the foundation is what's the problem. It's different if you had a little crack in the ceiling, you may be able to just plaster it up, but if the foundation of the thing is what the problem is, that's a whole new foundation you have to uproot. So I think this thing benefits and continues itself based on a lot of inequity and injustice that exists currently, which makes it kind of difficult to undo. I always ask folks to think of a community that you deem safe, that you just deem as a safe community. Most folks, when I ask that question, whether they admit it or not, they don't usually think of a community that has the most police in it already, or a community that sends the most folks to jail already. Those communities are usually the ones we deem the least safe, no matter how many law enforcement we have. And the communities that we deem safe are the communities that usually don't have that much law enforcement, but they have other things like safe and affordable housing that the community can afford. They have good schools that have nurses and social workers in it and sports programs. They have access to quality food, not just the corner store where they get potato chips. They don't do shopping in the corner store. They have access to mental health and health. They have access to jobs and funding to pay for the things that they need. Those are communities that we deem safe. And in the communities that we don't deem safe, instead of trying to get those things, usually whenever something's wrong, we send more law enforcement. That's usually the answer. And what we do know is that that's actually unfair to the police officer who doesn't have the tools to solve those problems. And if they use those tools, they get in trouble, rightfully so, but they also shouldn't be in that situation to use those tools. And the community doesn't get the help and the services that they need.